selves to my dishonor and slander. I am no enchantress, but your sister and natural cousin.
But Mary's protests fall on deaf ears. The queens are caught up in a battle bigger than themselves.
Catholics and Protestants are dying on both sides, in the Netherlands, in France. And what happens with Elizabeth and Mary is that, privately moderate though they may have been, they become polarized as figureheads of two sides in a more and more extreme conflict, in which their particular conflict with one another has become emblematic.
To Lord Burleigh, the Catholics are a clear and imminent danger.
Their malice is bent against your person. They will never cease, as long as the Scottish Queen lives.
Elizabeth refuses to be bounced into executing Mary, Queen of Scots. The evidence is not watertight, and also she has this abhorrence at the idea of executing an anointed queen.
Can I put to death the bird that, to escape the pursuit of the hawk, has fled to my feet for protection? Honor and conscience forbid.
Mary's held in castles all over England, but she never accepts being a prisoner.
Since you have detained me forcibly, if you suspect that I desire my liberty, I cannot help it. I am a free princess, in that I am not responsible to you or any other.
Months turn into years of confinement. Mary never tires of writing to Elizabeth, tens of thousands of words, demanding her freedom and pleading to meet. Each word scored into her embittered heart.
I have written to you several times during the last year to lay before your consideration the unworthy treatment which I have received in this captivity.
In her more desperate moments in captivity, she becomes increasingly a prisoner of her own imagination within this claustrophobic world. Mary did start sending small gifts to Elizabeth to attract her attention. Elizabeth had a terribly sweet tooth, so Mary would send marzipan, she would send nuts. She also had a mirror on a chain. She also sent this to Elizabeth as a gift.
She's trying to open up a line of communication so that maybe they can work this out. But Elizabeth just stonewalls them all.
I beg you to relieve yourself of the charge which I am to you.
But things only get worse for Mary. After 17 years in prison, she still hopes her son, James, the King of Scotland, will negotiate her release.
Elizabeth had the bright idea that Mary might go back to Scotland and rule jointly with James. Now, young James grew up to be a very effective king.
James, who's now approaching adulthood, decides he's going to ditch his mum.
The last thing he wanted was a discredited mother back, messing things up and getting in the way.
Was there ever a sight so detestable and impious before God and man than an only child despoiling his mother of her crown and royal estate? There is no King of Scotland, nor any queen but me.
What this does is it forces Mary to say, I got to get out of here. And from this point, she's willing to listen to even desperate plots.
Having lost all hope of regaining her crown or convincing Elizabeth to help her, Mary becomes obsessed with getting Elizabeth's crown.
I will not leave my prison save as Queen of England.
Burleigh suspects Mary is plotting to have Elizabeth killed and trying to make England Catholic again. So he sends his spies out to get proof.
Mary becomes this romanticized figurehead for a generation of young men educated in the Catholic colleges in France, in Rome, and in the Netherlands, who want to give their lives for their faith.
It doesn't take long before a young man writes to Mary. Burleigh's trap is set.
Anthony Babington is a young, not very bright, but enthusiastic Catholic gentleman with too much money and a lot of time on his hands.
He writes to her and he says that he will help spring her from her imprisonment, and at the same time, 6 gentlemen will do the deed. They will assassinate Elizabeth.
There be 6 noble gentlemen, all my private friends, who, for the zeal they bear the Catholic cause and your Majesty's service, will undertake the execution.
Everyone's waiting. Burleigh's waiting. Babington's waiting for Mary's reply. And 12 days later, it comes. She basically damns herself in that letter.
The affairs being thus prepared, and forces in readiness both without and within the realm, then shall it be time to put the 6 gentlemen to work upon the accomplishing of their design.
Babington's promising her ships and soldiers, and there never were any. There were no ships, there were no soldiers, there were no loyal Catholics waiting to carry her to elegance and luxury and freedom such as she'd known in her childhood. It was all a fantasy, and what's terribly, terribly sad is that Mary still believed it.
Burleigh's spies bring him a copy of Mary's letter. But will it be enough to condemn her to death?
I hope that God, which hath given us the light to discover this great conspiracy, will also give assistance to punish it.
Any sympathy Elizabeth ever had for Mary is gone.
Well, what do you think of your Queen of Scotland? With black ingratitude and treachery, she tries to kill me, who so often saved her life. Now, I am certain of her evil intent. It may be she will not have another opportunity to behave like this.
Despite the proof, Elizabeth can't bring herself to condemn Mary.
She felt guilty. She felt terrified that God would judge her on the last day for putting to death the divine right ruler. And, she probably felt upset and annoyed that she had been boxed into this situation that she never wanted to be in, that she had managed to avoid for most of her reign.
Instead, she turns her rage on the young plotters.
Babington and his associates were hanged on the gibbet. They were cut down while still alive, and they had their private parts chopped off in front of them. They were eviscerated. Their entrails were burnt in front of them, and then they were executed, and then they were quartered. And what's really gruesome about this is that Elizabeth asks Burleigh if he could come up with something else. And Burleigh assures her that if it's done properly, i.e. if they're cut down soon enough so that they can witness their own evisceration, then it would be pain enough.
On October the 25th, 1586, Mary is pronounced guilty of conspiring to murder Elizabeth.
I am quite ready and very happy to die, and to shed my blood for God Almighty, my Saviour and my Creator.
So the sentence was proclaimed. But even then, Elizabeth wouldn't do anything. Why? She just wanted it all to go away. She didn't want to be the source of the execution of an anointed queen.
If it had pleased God to have made us both milkmaids with pails on our arms, so that the matter rested between us two, and that I knew she should still seek my destruction, yet could I not consent to her death.
This is my own personal speculation, but I think she wanted Mary dead. She knew that Mary had to die. But when it came to it, she couldn't quite bring herself to believe that she was the person who was striking Mary's head off.
Out fair, out very. Out fair, out very. Neferiari ferry. Neferiari ferry. Neferiari ferry. Neferiari ferry. Neferiari ferry. Neferiari ferry.
To bounce Elizabeth into making this decision, she is told by Burghley, and this, when I first discovered this in the archives, I could hardly believe it. She's told by Burghley that the Spanish Armada's landed a year early in Wales.
Burghley invents a full-scale invasion to push her into signing.
The realm will be in great danger, principally the person of your majesty.
Burghley tells the Queen to double her guards. Who knows what might happen? She calls for the warrant, and she signs.
She signs it after they've been pressuring her to do it, and suddenly it's done.
Burghley quickly sends off the executioners.
But then, almost immediately, Elizabeth acts as if she didn't know what she was signing. I was given a whole pile of papers by my secretary. He should have told me that top of the pile was the warrant for the execution of the Queen of Scots. So she blames everybody but herself. All the time, she's trying to wash her hands of the blood of Mary, but they are covered in it.
After 19 years of confinement, Mary is suddenly told that she will die the next morning at Fotheringay Castle, February the 8th, 1587.
I did not think the Queen, my sister, would have consented to my death. But seeing that your pleasure is so, death shall be to me most welcome. Do not accuse me of presumption if on the eve of leaving this world and preparing myself for a better one, I remind you that one day you will have to answer for your charge.
Mary had decided that she would die a death that would always be remembered. She was going to go for a Catholic martyrdom. If she couldn't win in life, she would triumph in death.
Mary may not have had much sense, but what she did have was great style. And right until the end, she kept that up.
She's dressed in black. She's got a cross in one hand, a Latin prayer book in the other. There's a rosary around her wrist.
I hope you shall make an end to all my troubles.
She shows charity to her executioner. She consoles her weeping ladies.
Under her outer garments, she's dressed in tawny red, the colour of martyrdom.
There's even sort of gallows humour that you get. So she jokes with her executioner that she hasn't had such a servant undressing her before, and certainly not in front of the audience that she had there.
I have never taken off my clothes before such a company. Immanus tuus Domine, commendo spiritum meum. 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 Immanus tuus Domine.
The first stroke goes right into the back of the neck. She continues praying into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit, in Latin. The second blow goes really 9/10 of the way, but he finishes it off using the axe as a meat cleaver. The headsman picks up the head as you do and say, God save the Queen, except that, of course, Mary was wearing a wig, so the head rolls off the stage like a football.
In a sense, it's a terribly fitting kind of end, because like so much of Mary Queen of Scots' life, it's theatrical. And very good theatre this time.
In my end is my beginning.
In my end is my beginning. That was so apt. She's been immortalized after her death in many ways as the ultimate doomed heroine, the damsel in distress. Also as a figure of Scots nationalism, in a way, against those beastly English. And perhaps above all, she is the ultimate Catholic martyr.
We will never be sure what Elizabeth really felt for her cousin, but Mary's execution marked her forever.
This is something Elizabeth never got over. She always denied that she'd been responsible for Mary's death. She lied point blank to James that she was responsible. She blamed her counsellors.
I would you know, though not felt, the extreme pain which overwhelms my mind for that miserable accident. Far contrary to my meaning, I beseech you, God and many more know how innocent I am in this case.
After 26 years of never having met Mary, Elizabeth now finds she's left it too late. History will have to decide who won their battle.
It may seem that the winner is obvious. It is Elizabeth. She has put to death Mary, Queen of Scots. She's vanquished her rival in the end. But arguably, Mary has the last laugh, because it's her son James who becomes King of England when Elizabeth dies without any children of her own, without anyone else to leave the throne to. She's forced to leave it to the son of her greatest rival.
Mary's son, James, not only went on to rule both Scotland and England, he ensured that every subsequent British monarch would carry the blood of Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary had shaped history as profoundly as she had affected Elizabeth.
Elizabeth was haunted by Mary's ghost for the rest of her days. She could never quite get out of her head the guilt that she felt at putting Mary to death. And it's said that on Elizabeth's own deathbed, the name that she uttered last was that of the Queen of Scots.
Would that we, being two queens so near of kin, neighbours and living in one isle, should be friends and live together like sisters, than by strange means divide ourselves to the hurt of us both.
And this programme was shown in memory of Dr. Jenny Warmold.